Okay, so I know you, but everyone else doesn't. So what's your name?
My name is Michael James Irons.
Okay, and you're being interviewed because you were a hero or a veteran in our military. What branch of service did you serve in?
I first enlisted into the Air Force back in the day, got out, went to college, was with the Army National Guard, and then after I earned my degree, earned my commission in the Marine Corps.
Okay, when were the dates that you were in the service?
In the Air Force, I was in from 82 to 87. For Army National Guard, 87 to 90. And then for the Marine Corps, I was in from 91 to 08.
Man, that's a lot of years in the military. Why did you decide, like, once you're in the military, did you decide, now I want this to be my career for a long period of time? Or did you know that you're going to do that going into that?
No, I did not know it going into it. It was always see what my opportunities were. So after high school, I decided to join the Air Force after conversation with my father. So my father retired from the Marine Corps. So always growing up in David City, it was always growing up with his friends, former Marines. And so when I asked my father about joining the Marine Corps, he asked me like, well, why'd you want to do that, Mike? And I told him I needed money for college. And he gave me the lecture about you don't join the Marine Corps, my beloved Marine Corps, for money for college. You join the Marine Corps to be a Marine. So I said, well, okay, I'll join the Air Force. So after joining the Air Force, went to college. And then after college, had a three-prong attack. It was going to be either continue my education, get a master's, get a job, or check the military out again. And so as you can see, the Marine Corps won out of those
Yeah.
three options.
Was there like any like specific reason why you chose to go to the Marine Corps, or like did you want to go to the Marine Corps because of your father, or did you go to the Marine Corps for some different reason?
It was a combination per se, and I say that in a sense because when I called up the Air Force, talked to a senior airman, and she was basically telling me like, well, I don't know if we're taking any packages for any officers this year. It just might be, but when I called the Marines up at their recruiting station in Omaha, I got the reply of. This is this is the United States Marine Corps, Omaha, Nebraska recruiting station. How may I help you, ma'am or sir? So with that, that kind of got my attention, and also just a little drive to be a Marine. So with the conversation with my father, it was a do or die,
Yeah.
get it done or not. So
Okay, so we left off talking about why you enlisted in the Marines, specifically the second time. But let's go back and let's talk about your first days in service in the military
in the military
as an Air Force.
Air Force.
Yes.
So I enlisted after high school, and I went to basic training in, let's see, in November, December. And after that, for my technical school, I went to Chanute, Illinois, which is not there anymore. It's gone. And then shortly thereafter, I went straight up to Minot, North Dakota.
Okay.
So that was my first base. So being in the military, I mean, yes, you had a set of rules, you had to apply yourself and stuff like that. But being kind of like the new kid on the block. So I mean, it was always OJT. I mean, you were learning more than
OJT?
yeah, on the job training.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, the school taught you some, but it didn't teach you all. So
Yeah. Like what specifically did you learn at schooling?
schooling was like basic electricity, basic electrical systems, basic aircraft systems, but it was never curtailed to like, hey, this is this is what is on the B-52. This is how the KC-135 works.
Okay.
It was nothing Pacific airplane was.
Okay, so it's just an overview teaching about what you're going to be doing in the future in the Air Force.
Yep.
Okay, so What type of physical training was involved in your first days?
First days as in the Air
The Air
Force
Force.
at basic,
Yes.
there was a lot of running. I remember that distinctly. And other than that, on basic calisthenics. But yeah, that was about it.
Okay. Um, so did you like other than like physical training and then like school? Was there anything else that you did during that time, like free time or with like the military, or anything specific that you had to do or that you like wanted to do during that time?
No, I mean, being stationed up at Minot, it was basically an airfield and a cornfield. So I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I mean, there was like no outside attractions per se. Um, there was no beach to go to or any, downtown to go to per se. It was just the base. So basically, you went to work, got something to eat, and went to the barracks.
Mm, okay. Um, so what type of work did you do while in the service as your Air Force service?
For my Air Force service, so I was an aircraft electrician, so I was responsible for basically like the power plant of the aircraft. Anywhere between the generators and to, what system it was going to, like anti-lock brakes, skid control, speed brakes, flaps, auxiliary, um, um, power, and then yeah, that was about it from the generator on going into the system.
Okay. Did you request you, to become an aircraft electrician or not?
Yes, I did. So sitting down with a recruiter, they do, well, at the time, they give you choices, that what you wanted to do, and that seemed like pretty interesting. After you do your ASVAB, Armed Forces Aptitude Battery of Test, I think it is, so.
Okay. Before entering the military, or well, Air Force in this case, did you have any specific skills or training that helped you get your job as an aircraft electrician?
No, no.
You just went in like, oh, list the jobs, pick one, or like,
Take the test first, see what your aptitude laid in, and then they would give you a choice between them.
okay. I guess how was the food while in the Air Force those
Yeah.
first times? And did it change over time? Because over 26 years, did the food change over time?
Um, so being enlisted in the Air Force, I always ate at the chow halls, okay?
Okay.
And that was not the best food. I mean, I can't remember anything I look forward to or remembered fondly. It was just chow hall food. But then, being an officer in the Marine Corps, I was not basically eating at the chow halls that much. I mean, going through training and such, but I was living off base at the time. So, and I don't remember anything specific from the chow hall, but I do remember like the evolution of the MREs, the meals ready to eat. I don't know if you ever seen any of that.
I think I have, but it's been a while.
Because like at first when I was in Air Force Basic, we had C rations and it was just the leftover stuff because they were being phased out and they were going in with the MREs. So these MREs, and I don't know why I remember this, but you had a big package and it'd be, your meat compartment, right? So this package was this big and you tear out the end, but the spoon was always about this short, all right, So individuals, as always, like figures would just be covered with the food because you're trying to dig in there and stuff like that. So believe it or not, over the years, I saw that the spoon got expanded. Other stuff like that, like dehydrated fruit. This stuff was just horrible. It was just like saw paper. It was just, yeah, I can't describe it any better than that. But seeing stuff like phased out and other stuff coming in and stuff like that. Another thing was with the Tabasco. So yeah, they started coming in with the Tabasco bottles, and those were quite popular.
Okay. How are the rules in the military, as both in the Air Force and with your time in the Marines?
And when you say rules as in being enforced or being strict or
All of the above.
all of the above,
Yeah.
it was always at your discretion. And when I say that at your discretion, as a officer in the United States Marine Corps, that I did hold people accountable, like Article 15's, page 11's. Page 11 is like, hey, you need to straighten up. You're right here. Article 15 is kind of like, yeah, you went overboard, and it could be like, hey, yeah, we think we can pull you back, or like, hey, I'm gonna ding you. So with that said, I mean, so I was like on top of the, I don't wanna say food chain, but on the pyramid, and I was dishing out the punishment or corrective action if need
Okay.
be. On the Air Force side, I was just on the other side, i.e., I was adhering to the rules. So, I mean, it was a paradigm shift per se.
Okay. You saw it from each direction that way.
Yes.
Okay. Now that's interesting viewpoint if you can have it from both sides. Um, so you described what you did in the Air Force with your free time, saying that it was just a air base and a cornfield.
Yeah.
What was different about your time in the Marines with your free time?
If I can step back, so when I was in the Air Force, I got orders to Lakenheath in England. So that was about, just north of London, north of Cambridge. So we did a lot of traveling around. It was like every other weekend we were going someplace.
Oh.
In London, Cambridge, I'm trying to remember the other places. Yarmouth, that was a fun place on the coast. And then in the Marine Corps, oh yeah, and also mention, we also went to Turkey a couple of times for a deployment, and then to Spain a couple of times also for rotation. In the Marine Corps, it was a different atmosphere because being married with children, it was pretty much regulated on base, not in the barracks, but in base housing. And a couple of other posts were off post, but right next to the base.
Okay. How is base housing different, or like in comparison, like in like Aurora, for instance, housing in Aurora? Was there any differences, or how is that difference?
Yes, it was at the time when I was in, it was cookie cutter. It was just, stamp after stamp after stamp, plain Jane housing. That there was no frills, no nothing on there. But right when I was getting out, they were transitioning in what they call PPV, public-private venture, that they were tearing everything down and they were putting up some nice housing. So kind of missed out on that. But before, I mean, it was just plain Jane housing, no thrills, no nothing.
Yeah, cookie cutters then.
Yep.
Okay. What kind of uniforms were issued to you in both Air Force and in Marines?
In the Air Force, it was pretty basic, as in you had your blues on there, and then you had your work utility uniforms. That was it. But in the Marine Corps, it got a little complicated and expensive because as an officer, you had to pay for your uniforms out of your own pocket.
Yeah.
So with that one, you had to buy a sword. That was mandatory. And then with that, you had your blues also, and then you had your alphas, and each uniform had its variations. As in, like your alphas was your green uniform. Then you had your bravos, so that was without the jacket, with the long sleeve, with your medals and ribbons and so on and so on. So you had your blues for official ceremonies, alpha for official office work per se,
Yeah.
and then utilities for your basic day-to-day.
Okay. Was there any difference? Like, did you get like any like free passes since you went from Air Force to Marines with like the basic training or not?
No, I did not get any passes anywhere, shape, or form. So the only thing that did carry over was my time in service for retirement points.
Oh,
And
no.
basically, that's it.
I don't know.
Yeah, they didn't cut me any slack.
Yeah. So now let's talk about it. Well, did you serve during any wars during your time of service?
Yes. So when I was in the Air Force, there was I believe in 1986, raid on Muammar Gaddafi's. So the unit I was stationed with in Lakenheath, they were the main flying squadron that went in to his compound. So that was pretty realistic because before that it was just day to day, but building up to this you knew something was happening
Yeah.
in there, and the aircraft that was lost that was from the squadron that I was in. So that was kind of made it more realistic per se than just hearing it in the news.
Yeah.
Then fast forward to the Marine Corps. So I was part of the initial invasion of Iraq back in 2003. So with that, I was part of a combat service support group that provided service to like the front units. Not to bore you too much, but 10 classes of supplies. So food, water, fuel, parts, ammo, and medical supplies. So we're a part of that unit, pushing all those supplies up forward to the units in the invasion on that. And then after getting back, I think it was around 6 or 8 months that I volunteered for an individual augmentee. And an individual augmentee is when you go and flesh out a standing unit already over there. So I went back and I was stationed in the green zone for I'm trying to remember the acronym here, Multinational Security Force M2. So it was kind of like a military training team. And so I was in support of these teams going around to the Iraq, and they were teaching the Ministry of Interior, the police forces, and the military on human intelligence gathering.
Okay. How did you travel to the war zone? And then how was that experience traveling to the invasion of Iraq, for instance?
It was kind of surreal because each time I went over there, it was a commercial flight.
Yeah.
So you had all the niceties on there. But then, like you're stepping off the plane and you're going oh, this is it. So for the second time I was up there, I flew into Kuwait commercial and transferred over. And we took a C-130 in. And yeah, it was ooh, getting a little closer now.
Yeah.
And I don't know the correct terminology, but it did a corkscrew because at the time the aircrafts were taking fire at the time going into the international airport. So it was like 10 or 6,000. So it wasn't coming in steady. It corkscrews down and then it goes in like that. So that was kind of oh yeah, we're getting into the game.
Yeah.
So.
So, was the food any different while serving in a war compared to not serving in a war, or was it any different or not?
Oh, that's a good point. The first go around, during the invasion, yeah, it was rations. So it was not being cooked out of a field kitchen or anything. I would have taken a field kitchen that. But I mean, it was just heat up rations that they had. So it wasn't very good. Powdered eggs,
Powdered eggs.
you always remember the taste of that. Stale meat, it was, but going back the second time, since you were established, so I was in the green zone. And so with that was some good food right there. They took care of people because, I'm trying to remember the company's name, God, I can't remember they're providing support, administrative support, chow halls, laundry and stuff like that, so.
Okay. So, what was your duties while serving during wartime?
During the wartime, in the first half, I was part of a CISOC, Combat Service Support Operational Center. So basically, it was collecting all the requirements for the units that were up front or needed any supplies or any other maintenance requirement, and making sure that it was provided to them. And then, providing, like water, okay, fuel on there. And then the second time being part of the military training team. So, trying to make a long story short, so I was assigned getting their training packages ready. So, when these individuals would graduate or leave the human intelligence course, so they would be equipped with a car, you know, let's see, flak jackets, weapons, um, let's see, cameras, video cameras, so on and so on. So I was responsible in dealing with like the local vendors on some of the items and then getting that up to the school. Because I was stationed in the Green Zone in Baghdad and the school was up in Taji. So I had to make sure everything was getting delivered up there.
How far away is Baghdad from Taji?
If I remember correctly, I want to say maybe about 30, 40, 50 miles in there.
Okay. Did you ever see combat while being over in Iraq?
Direct combat, no.
Okay. Um, what battles specifically did you provide support for?
It would be the initial invasion. So, in the Marine Corps specifically, so we have MEFs, Marine Expeditionary Forces, and those usually consist of like three entities. So you have the ground, we affectionately call them grunts, the fighting force. Then you have the air element, giving cover to the grunts, and then you have a combat service support element. So those three elements get mixed together, they form a MEF, and they get, you know, integrated in support of the operational plan going up there. So during the initial kickoff, it was 4th ID Infantry Division out of the Army. And as it was explained to me, nobody goes to the dance alone. I mean, you're always going to have a mixture of all the forces. You know? So 4th ID, they were the main effort and they were the main drive that when they crossed their breach point, that they were going straight up to Baghdad, and one MEF, they were providing cover on the right. So they were direct and they were indirect support. So they're providing a right lateral, like blocking motion, so they can sprint up to Baghdad.
Okay. How is the weather like over in Iraq?
It was hot.
Hot.
It was ungodly hot.
Ooh.
We're talking 105, 110.
I don't like it when it's 90.
Oh no, it was hot. I just remember sometimes that before you get accumulated to it, and I was trying to find like a water point, and I was just splashing water on me. That's how hot it was. I mean, once you got used to it, and it didn't stay that hot all the time. It seemed like it peaked in the beginning, then it started going down as the months went by, or unless I was getting used to it. So yeah, and people were pushing a lot of water down. If you didn't, and you were going down yourself.
Yeah. Tell me about like your friends while in the military. You can say both while in the Air Force and in the Marines. Did you have any friends you still have relationships with today, or did you just cut off after you retired from the military? Or?
I do know a couple of people from the Air Force days, so I see them on Facebook every once in a while. Say hello, and that's about it. I do have some good friends still back in Camp Pendleton area in San Clemente. I don't know why, but we just clicked, stayed together over the years, and it has been years now, like 17 years now. But yeah, not a lot per se, but for a small click, and it's all supply. I don't know why, but yeah, we stayed close over the years.
Um, so while at war, what was the most frightening experience that you experienced?
I think actually going through the breach point, so I was not part of the main effort that broke the breach point at the time. But I was right behind him a couple of days because I was, like I said before, looking for all the lost equipment that was needed to be accounted for and followed up. So
No.
after finding a majority of the equipment itself, we got into the breach point, and that was seeing like the destruction going through the oil fields, and then um, just going up there because it was always stop go according to the situation, what was going on.
Okay. What was your most interesting experience in the military?
Interesting. I would have to say a cumulative of, being part of the initial invasion of Iraq back in 2003, and then going back after a few months after that. So I got back, we left in, I think, February. We got back, I think, in August, and then I went back in August next year.
Mm.
So going back and just seeing the changes and seeing um, you started to see everything starting to get built up and being
Progress.
executed. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What was, other than it being 105 degrees outside over in Iraq, what was your most exhausting experience?
I think exhausting experiences. So on the first go around, we went up to an air base, a abandoned Iraqi air base that was just south of Al Nasiriyah. If I remember it, Al Nasiriyah, I think that's it. And so the dirt was like baked by the heat and stuff like that. So if you went over it, it like turned into this dust. And at some parts, it was like maybe, a foot, a couple of feet deep. If you did not stay on the hard ball, that, it was just get chewed up, and it was just like a dust bowl at best.
Mm. Yeah. Was there, like, after, when you came back home, was there any kind of like homecoming, or was like anybody specifically waiting for you?
Well, my family was there,
Yeah.
yes. But the first time going over and coming back with a unit, yes. There was the homecoming and stuff like that. But going over as an individual augmentee, you don't come back as a collective unit. You're like, okay, you did your time, hey, you can go back now. So you basically, hop on a plane in Baghdad. I go into Kuwait, and then I'm sticking around there, and I'm saying like, hey, any flights home? And they're like, oh, we got you, don't worry, we'll let you know. And then out of the blue, they come to you and go like, hey, we got you a flight. So you're grabbing all your stuff, and you're going back just individually.
Mm.
And but yeah, just I landed in San Diego. The wife came pick me up, and I'm like, hey, good to see you. So it was another like surreal moment, like
Yeah.
stepping back into the United States after that.
Mm. Okay. How was that homecoming experience like after that first time you came back from Iraq?
First time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was rewarding. It was worthwhile. Going through. Had a couple parades and such. So.
Okay. Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Other than the typical, overseas deployment, Iraqi freedom, uh, nothing else.
Okay. What was your highest rank that you achieved while in the military?
So I achieved Major 04.
Okay. So, like, what does Major 04 mean for, like, your rank?
So for the rank as an officer, you have the junior level, that's lieutenant, no, second lieutenant, I'm losing all this. First lieutenant, second lieutenant, first lieutenant, and captain, okay? And so then you go into the field grade, so in that, it composes of a major, lieutenant colonel, and colonel.
Okay. How did people entertain themselves while in the military? Like,
Getting in trouble.
oh, getting
There's always that element there. Um, so, I mean, there was always different facets. You know, when you go on a base nowadays, you're gonna see a lot of activities, and I'm saying that because people realize that you put a bunch of people in barracks, they're just gonna get in trouble. It
yeah.
always happens. I'm not gonna say that it ever happened to me, but it seemed like for transition going into the Air Force, and when you see it nowadays, that people realize that, and they're providing a lot more outside support and activities for them.
Okay. What did you do after your military experience?
After my military experience, I didn't land very far from the military.
No.
So I was a military contractor in Marfort Pac, Marine Forces Pacific in Hawaii. So my duties and responsibilities were, I was assisting with the relocation of the Marine Forces from Okinawa going to Guam. And that was like all the facility studies and the structure that was gonna be in place to, for them.